When we're embarking on digital transformation, we're all looking for the easy button. We're looking for the easy answers, the things that will be the silver bullet that will make our transformation that much easier for us. And what this drives is a lot of misconception about what it really takes to make a digital transformation successful. So today I want to talk about the top 10 misconceptions that you should avoid and watch out for in your digital transformation. One of the most fundamental misunderstandings about digital transformation is that digital and technology are somehow going to drive the transformation. And there certainly is a great amount of technological innovation that's happened in recent years, and the opportunities are endless. So technology can certainly enable change, but it's not the technology that's going to drive the transformation, or at least it shouldn't. What should drive the transformation, at least the more successful ones, are the things related to operational improvements and organizational improvements, and also things that are aligned with your overall strategy. So be sure not to fall into that trap of thinking that just because you bought the shiny new technology that somehow is going to drive the transformation for you. It's still your business needs, your organizational needs, your overall strategy. That stuff should be driving your transformation, not the other way around. In the world of software development and even startups, the whole concept of Agile is becoming more and more popular. And so organizations are shifting their mindsets from the traditional waterfall approach to implementation, which basically defines an implementation as spending your time up front, defining your processes, clearly defining your requirements, and having a cutoff before you move on to the next stage of your project. Whereas Agile is more focused on picking off little pieces of your organization, little pieces of technology, and deploying those quickly. Now, in theory, it sounds like the Agile approach is going to be faster. But what we found, at least with enterprise-wide digital transformations, is that if you start off with an Agile mindset, that's actually going to lead you faster down an unclear path. And it's going to be easier to get lost, and you're just going to get lost faster in your transformation. Whereas if you take the more traditional waterfall approach, even though it has a negative connotation to a lot of people, and you take the time to define a blueprint for what you want your overall transformation to look like in terms of your operations, your organizational improvements, then you can shift to an Agile mindset in terms of how you execute that rollout. So be sure to not get too enamored with Agile or think that Agile is somehow going to solve all your problems. Agile may be one arrow in your quiver, but it's not necessarily the silver bullet you're looking for. So be sure to use Agile if you're going to use it selectively, but don't rely on it as the only method you use to speed up your implementation. Sometimes starting off slower can actually speed things up later on. One of the most common misconceptions in the market is also the fact that a lot of vendors are out there selling this idea that cloud deployments are cheaper than on-premise deployments. And there's also a further allegation that cloud systems are cheaper in the long term, even post-implementation. And we found this to simply not be true. Now, on one hand, you may be saying, but we're getting rid of our servers, we don't need as big of an IT staff. That's partially true, although we do find that most organizations fail to realize those cost savings. But the bigger challenge is that the problem with cloud solutions is that you have high ongoing annual costs that are going to be higher long-term than your initial purchase of on-premise systems. So it's a lot like leasing versus buying a car. When you lease a car, you have a steady ongoing payment and you have less flexibility as to what you can do with the product that you're leasing. Same is true for cloud, versus buying a car where you have a bigger upfront payment, but then you don't have a payment, even though you might have some maintenance and things like that, you don't have that ongoing monthly or annual payment. And that's a lot like on-premise. So I don't want to suggest that cloud is not a good solution because most vendors are going that way. Most customers want cloud solutions, but go in with eyes wide open, understanding that you're probably going to spend more money on your cloud deployment and your long-term ownership of that cloud solution than if you had on-premise. Now, you may be getting more value out of it, and it's probably likely that you're getting a higher ROI out of that higher cost. But don't go in thinking that you're going to save money, because we find that most organizations simply don't save money in the long term. So just building on this whole misconception related to cloud, we talked about the cost side of things, but there's also a misconception that cloud is somehow better than on-premise. And first of all, it all depends on what you mean by better. For some organizations, it's clearly better. For some organizations, it's not. But I think the biggest pitfall that organizations fail to realize is that cloud solutions simply aren't as mature as on-premise. And someday this statement will be completely obsolete and you can delete this comment at that point in the future. But for right now, where we are sitting here in 2021, cloud systems simply haven't developed to the point of what the old on-premise systems have. And the reason for that is not because cloud technology is somehow inferior. It's simply because the software vendors had years and decades of R&D and innovation in on-premise solutions, and now they're trying to shift everything over to the cloud, and it's just taking them time to get to the point where they were with on-premise. So again, even if cloud is the right answer for you and that's the direction you're going, go in with a realistic understanding that you're probably going to have some gaps. The products probably aren't going to be as mature as you'd like, and you want to make sure you go in with a full understanding of where those weaknesses might be. Another common misconception perpetuated by the software and technology industry is the fact that if you upgrade to a newer version of the solution that the vendor provides, that it's going to be an easy upgrade. It's going to be a simple lift and shift. You're just shifting from one platform to another. And as I mentioned before, cloud solutions are largely rewrites of new technology for a new platform in the cloud. And so shifting from an on-premise system to a cloud system isn't as easy as most vendors will tell you. So for example, if you're an SAP customer and you're using ECC, or if you're a Microsoft customer and you're using Dynamics AX, shifting to SAP S/4HANA or Microsoft D365 is not an upgrade. That is a re-implementation. Yes, there may be some common look and feel that looks familiar to you because you're used to SAP or Microsoft or whatever your product is, but you're largely going through a re-implementation of an entirely different product, entirely different architecture, entirely different way of deploying. So just recognize that you are implementing a new solution regardless of whether you have used that same vendor in the past or not. It's generally more of a bigger shift and a bigger change than most organizations realize. One of the most dangerous hidden misconceptions that we see in digital transformations is the phenomena of organizations thinking that change is going to be easy. Their people are ready for change, their people want the change, they don't like their old systems, they don't like their old processes, so change management isn't going to be a problem. How hard can it be? They're all on board, they want to move forward. And that's probably true. I rarely doubt that statement when we're dealing with a new client. But what I do doubt is that is going to be the reality. What typically happens is people start off excited, but then they get less and less excited as the project goes on because they realize how painful the change is really going to be. So no matter how excited your team might seem right now, wherever you are in your journey, chances are they will be less excited over time, and even the best intentioned employees are going to resist change, even if it's unintentionally. So you want to make sure you have a very solid change management plan and invest just as heavily in organizational change as you do other parts of your digital transformation to overcome this misconception. If your digital transformation entails some sort of ERP technology, enterprise resource planning like SAP, Oracle, Microsoft, whatever the case may be, you're probably hearing a message that our system, our single ERP system, can solve all of your problems. It can fully automate your entire organization from order to cash, procure to pay, customer relationship management. Everything you need can be addressed by our ERP system. It's a great sales message. It's what vendors typically will use. But you just need to understand that by definition, ERP systems, yes, can provide a broad set of capabilities, but it is impossible for them to be everything to everyone within your organization and certainly within other organizations as well. So inevitably, you're going to have trade-offs when you implement new ERP technology. Yes, there will be strengths and areas where the technology is a great fit for your organization, but you will have areas of your organization where the technology is not as great of a fit. And that becomes an organizational change issue as well as a technology issue along the way. So be sure you understand realistically that if you go with an ERP system, if that's the way you want to go, may be the right answer for you, but still look at the dark side of that. Look at the risk, look at what the cost implications are, the change management implications, because that's where the project will either succeed or fail, is how well you address those risks. So be sure you fully understand that a single ERP system is no more of an easy button than any of the other things that we've talked about here so far. Another misconception is this idea that a pre-configured solution off the shelf is somehow going to speed up your implementation. In theory, that's sort of true, certainly from a technology perspective, to the extent that the vendor really does have pre-configurations, although I will say that that concept is oftentimes oversold and underdelivered by vendors, but let's just say in theory your vendor really does have pre-configurations, either an industry pre-configuration or pre-configured workflows that can just work off the shelf out of the box. Yes, from a technical perspective, that is true. It will speed up the deployment, but what it doesn't speed up, in fact, might actually slow things down, is as it relates to adjusting your business processes to those pre-configurations and adjusting your people to those pre-configurations. That's what takes the most time and effort, is the people and process side of things. So even if you could speed up, or even if you do speed up the technology side of the equation, you might be speeding that work stream up, but you are extending the other parts of the implementation on the people and process side of things. So be sure you just go in with eyes wide open again, understand that it's a sales tactic. If they have pre-configurations and they really exist, great. That's a good starting point. I wouldn't say to abandon that concept, but just understand that you're gonna have to make up that time and effort and focus elsewhere in the transformation. When I was coming up in the world of consulting in the late 90s into the early 2000s, a common saying we would hear is no one ever got fired for hiring IBM to handle their transformation. Except I learned over the years that plenty of people have gotten fired for hiring IBM, as well as Accenture and Deloitte and some of those other big names that you might feel safe with just because it's such a big, well-known name and because you have hundreds of thousands of people on the bench that could support your project. Big SIs, we found, are no more likely to reduce risk than other types of providers. In fact, I can make a pretty strong argument that your risk is actually increased by using a big system integrator, simply because you're going to pay for that system integrator. You're going to pay for an army of consultants that are full-time, dedicated to your project, and SIs are very good at getting more and more people on your project. That's their job, is to staff consultants on your project. That's how I started my career. Right out of grad school, I was put on a project where I probably didn't need to be on that project, but they found one to put me on, and I started billing full-time day one, even while I was getting trained still. So that's just an example from my background, but even beyond that, going forward, over the last 20-some years, I find that same phenomena, that SIs generally are going to cost you more when they're one of the big names. So if you're a big global organization and you feel like you need that global footprint, you certainly want to consider those big SIs like Accenture, Deloitte, Capgemini, Ernst & Young, IBM, whoever it may be. But it's also important and imperative to look at those mid-tier providers as well. There's a lot of really good mid-tier system integrators that may not have the best known name, but oftentimes they can get the more experienced, better resources because the big SIs are better known for hiring kids out of college, whereas the mid-tier providers are often the ones that will get the senior people that want to stay in consulting, but they don't want to work at one of the big SIs. So really look at those mid-tier options and really fully compare your options to make sure that you're getting the best option for your organization. 10th misconception is that your system integrator is your project manager. And this is a common mistake. It may sound like I'm splitting hairs here, but it's important to split these hairs in this example. So what I mean by this is oftentimes organizations pick a technology and then they go hire a system integrator. And that system integrator is viewed to be the outsourced model that's going to manage the entire project and do the project for them. And there's two problems with this approach. First of all, you need to have ownership of the project. You need your people just as involved in the project, if not more, than the system integrator. Second of all, it's important to recognize that the system integrator is only providing project management as it relates to the technology, the software. So if you're deploying an ERP system or CRM or whatever the case may be, that's their job, is to focus on the technology. But you as an organization need to focus on the entire transformation. You need to look at the business process model, the overall strategy, the organizational change strategy, the data migration strategy, the overall solution architecture, your end-to-end business processes, all the things that your system integrator may say they do, but they're doing it in the context of technology, and you need to look at everything outside of that. So really resist that temptation to fully outsource a project to a system integrator, and resist that temptation to assume that the project manager from the system integrator is going to manage the entire thing. You should have someone sitting on top of the system integrator, as well as other work streams within your project, managing all of the internal and external resources as well. So I hope this has helped dispel some of the common misconceptions related to the myth of the easy button. There is no easy button, there's no easy answer, and if it sounds like it's an easy button, silver bullet type of answer, chances are it's probably not real. So for more information on this and other best practices for how to make your transformation more successful, I encourage you to download our 2021 Digital Transformation Report. It's a report that covers a ton of best practices, software reviews, independent rankings of different types of technologies, meant to help you through your transformation. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.